Hello, we thank you for tuning in to this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. Please don't be a stranger and let us know what you thought about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. To join our other AMC online programs, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check updates on our website, amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, and produce together. All right, so today's presentation, if we were to go to the first slide, is called, How is Your Life Changing in the Era of Zoom? Thinking about our future life online. I am Joe Crescente, and I'm a media literacy specialist. And I do a variety of presentations on media literacy. And this presentation in particular is really a result of just watching things, reading things, looking at social media over the last couple of months. Some things that I've seen. Every week when I try to prepare the presentation, I take little notes and I put them in a Word doc before I start putting them into a PowerPoint presentation. And this is one that goes back even 6 weeks, little bits of notes, and it took a while for it to become a full presentation like it is now. So to change, go to the next slide. I don't think there's a lot of certainty or agreement about anything among experts at the moment, except that there will be digital shift as a result of our experiences during this pandemic. Just change the slide. When I was an instructor at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, my students and I often discussed the blurry boundaries between the concepts of online and offline life. Changing the slide. Usually these debates centered around the following: the boundaries between online and offline life. The majority of the students insisted, they absolutely saw them clearly. This is my online life, this is my offline life, and they thought it was a virtue to keep them separate. They didn't think it was actually that difficult to keep them separate. We usually found out that they were not always, as aware of the blurring of the boundaries between online and offline life as they thought they were. And I'm really curious to see what these same students would say now, when it's really hard to tell the difference at times between your online and offline life, when so many of us, are on Zoom or on Skype or on a variety of digital conferencing platforms all the time these days. Changing the slide. So to kind of define the online versus the offline lives, the distinction between online and offline is conventionally seen as the distinction between computer mediated communication, like what we're doing right now, and face-to-face communication. FaceTime, but not in the Apple version of FaceTime, meaning like face-to-face, seeing somebody in person. Sometimes these two lives connect, and that's the strange thing, right? I was just thinking a lot about, like, did you ever, meet someone for the first time and they know a lot about you? Because so much of our lives are online, you can find out so much about people by doing searches for them and so on. This certainly has happened to me before. And, I think the first time it happened, I was first time it happened, maybe it was like 13 years ago. Somebody's like, oh yeah, I searched you. And I was at the time in 2007 or whenever that was very surprising to me. But it's kind of like a very normal thing to do these days, is to get a sense of who somebody is, read a little bit about their biography online, maybe check their social media and so on before meeting them. Changing the slide. So one question I'd love to discuss at the end of this presentation is, have the boundaries between your online and offline lives changed lately? I would love to discuss this at the end. But if you have some ideas, please just start entering them into the live chat comments now or any time throughout this presentation, and we'll take a look at those towards the end. Changing the slide. So to get back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, there are several key digital areas that the current pandemic is likely to impact, and the main ones there are education, shopping, and work. Meaning that these things are going to we're going to be doing more of this online, probably after this whole thing is done than we were doing before it began. In some ways, we were already trending towards some of these things, in all areas, right? With education, with shopping, and with work. But this, is probably going to accelerate some of the changes that are happening. So, changing the slide, an article put out by the World Economic Forum suggests to look at education that online learning has been shown to increase retention of information, take less time, meaning that changes that the coronavirus have caused might be here to stay. The integration of information technology in education will be further accelerated with online education, and quite possibly will eventually become an integral, very important component of school education. Like I said, it was already trending towards this, right? Online education has been growing in popularity, especially in the last, I'd say, 3-4 years, for sure. So to look at shopping, an article titled, changing the slide, Understanding the COVID-19 Effect on Online Shopping Behavior, found that people are doing more bulk buying, more online shopping in general, across the board, in pretty much any country. People are changing what they're buying, when they're buying it, and how. And brands are having to adapt and be flexible to meet changing needs. So not only is shopping having this, but business is also having to adapt and be more flexible to meet the demands of the shopper, the 21st century COVID-19 shopper. Changing the slide. Additionally, it was found that while people in general are concerned about the growing pandemic, the youngest generations are particularly altering their purchasing behaviors. So I think that, while my parents probably are changing their behavior minimally, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I think somebody who's about, 18, 20, 22, probably are having a bigger impact, and probably are more likely to have more long-term impact, on their purchasing behaviors. Grocery, e-commerce, and entertainment subscription services have boomed in recent months. In fact, they seem to be the only, businesses that seem to be doing really well, weathering the storm, even increasing their profits. So, changing the slide, Business Insider recently asked 200 CEOs from a variety of industries a 3-part question. How will the way you operate change because of the coronavirus? Will your industry change? And how will the world change? And to change the slide, the results were that chief executives say the pandemic has pointed the way toward a near future of flexible work, a more relaxed work-life balance, and more inclusive culture, meaning more accommodating to people with different disabilities, perhaps more flexible towards parents with small children, and so on. So a lot of this could be very positive, I think, the changes as a result of this. And these are things that definitely people were talking about before the pandemic. So, hopefully, if anything positive can be gleaned, it's some more positive changes that allow for more flexible work, better work-life balance, and more inclusive work cultures. Remote work will become more common than ever, with fewer people heading to the office, and many executives are reevaluating business travel, as they've discovered that, we can get things done by, doing it on a, video conferencing thing, app, or so on. Not every meeting has to take place in person. Changing the slide. Video conferencing technologies have definitely exploded in the last few months. I've used Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype, BlueJeans, WhatsApp, and House Party all in the last 2 months for social and professional purposes. Changing the slide. Even Contactia, I found out yesterday, has added a video service that can, allow up to 8 people to participate in group video calls. Changing the slide. Google Meet. So Google added another kind of like more professional-based app recently in the last week or two called Google Hangouts Meet, Google Meet, which is I haven't used yet, but is more geared towards professional usage than just the regular Google Hangouts, which was essentially Skype type technology. So there's that. And to change the slide, but is this all this digital living having an impact on us as we relate to other people, as we interact with other people? What impact is it having on us? That's what I'd like to explore. Changing the slide. Let's take this example from Facebook. This is a real life example of somebody I know. So a Russian-born friend who is a tenured professor at Harvard University said on April 21st, Cambridge Public Schools just extended school closures until the end of the year. Kill me now. And somebody asked, well, what did you expect? And they respond, in Europe, they're opening the schools. In Denmark, for example, a few weeks ago. So this friend really was surprised that, the public schools had been extended to be closed till the end of the year. When the writing was, for me, the writing was on the wall everywhere. A lot of places in the United States were extending school closures for long periods of time, certainly through the end of this school year. School years typically end in June in the United States. I would be more surprised that somebody would not, a school district would not do that. And I don't have a child, but this was, to change the slide, this made me realize that our perception in terms of reality change a bit when we get our information and advice online. Where our advice is, comes from reading the news, and all of a sudden at some level we imagine or see the world as one big continuous place, right? This person was like, well, in Denmark, they're closing schools, so doesn't that, or in Denmark they've opened the schools again, so doesn't that mean we're doing that here in Boston? As if there was, no disconnect between the two examples at all. And this definitely clearly seemed to me, changing the slide to be have something to do with confirmation bias, right? They have it in Denmark, surely we should have this in Boston. Just because this person wanted something doesn't mean it's actually, necessarily always true. But they were led to believe that since they'd been reading about their friends in Europe and the schools opening there, this person assumed that the same was going to be happening where they lived, even if it's a completely different country. So, this amount of time we're spending online and where we get our advice from and where we're reading our news, and sometimes we allow these geographical boundaries to blur a little bit, this can skew reality and can leave some people quite disappointed when they discover that what is happening here is not necessarily happening here. Changing the slide. There's also something called Zoom fatigue. And there's definitely people who are spending considerably more time on video conferencing technologies than I, but I can certainly sympathize with what it is, right? This idea that we only have, 99% of our interactions are coming from people through a screen. So in an article titled, "I will not be attending your exhausting Zoom gathering," you can just read how tired this author Christina Catarucci is of just like, being in, group conferences, calls. So she analyzes why Zoom does not give us the same satisfaction as real life interactions. So one of them is, changing the slide, the lack of normal eye contact, right? Most people spend the call looking at their screen a few inches below or to the side of their camera, giving you the perpetual feeling of trying to get the attention of someone who's ever slightly so, preoccupied, looking at their phone or, reading something over here, taking a look at the clock, looking, at the magnets on their refrigerator, I don't know. Changing the slide. But the opposite is also true, right? You have to look at each other's faces the entire time, right? There are rarely natural breaks in conversation on Zoom, as there might be during a typical group dinner or coffee date, and it's much harder to have a comfortable silence or manage an uncomfortable one when all parties are staring at one another nonstop, right? There's no break to take a look at the menu, right? There's no, hey, I'll be right back kind of thing. When you're on Zoom, you're supposed to be there in the gaze of the Zoom, so to speak. Changing the slide. So the author concludes by saying that this quarantine has given 21st century humanity its first glimpse at what it might feel like to confine even more of our lives to the world behind the screen. And it's a deeply unsatisfying view. Video chatting is exhausting. Live streamed events are a snooze. Turns out virtual life is a sorry substitute for a real one. Maybe that's a good thing. Changing the slide. There's also something called Zoom bombing, which I've mentioned in several presentations, last month, I think. And as changing the slide to this, as COVID-19 has necessitated an increased use of telecommuting solutions, there have been instances of public Zoom meetings getting hijacked or Zoom bombed by malicious actors. I've seen examples of this in Russia, in the United States, all over Europe. This is a common thing, right? Where somebody comes on and puts some very, kind of controversial or scandalous content on there. It can get really, ugly. It could be some racially motivated, slurs and all sorts of stuff to video images that are not appropriate for all audiences, to say the least. Changing the slide. So some tips, though, for avoiding Zoom bombing. The most important one is to prohibit open access to the screen sharing feature during your meeting. And you can disable this setting in your account profile under settings, right? So limiting who's able to access it if you want to avoid Zoom bombing. Some people want to do a big event and they want to attract the largest possible crowd, et cetera, for the event. But think about, what you would do if somebody Zoom bombed your meeting. Would that be good? So something to think about before you, set up your meeting, right? So when hosting a public meeting, do not use your personal Zoom meeting ID. Create a separate meeting event for any link that you share publicly. Changing the slide. So generally, people copy their neighbor's behavior. By neighbor, I don't just mean your roommate or the person next door, but people they know, people that they're in contact with, right? And I think we're mostly in contact with people online these days, rather than we don't see people, we don't go out very often anymore, and we don't run into our neighbors nearly as often. So people we're in contact with, and a lot of this is online. But in shopping, for example, right, this notion of hoarding and toilet paper in the United States, buckwheat in Russia. Every country's got their thing that people run to the store and buy and stock up on in an emergency or a situation such as this. So in shopping, this leads to seeing other people buying up the shelves and then seeing a scarcity of necessary products. Validates the decision to stock up. I should do this. There's got to be some reason that people are getting this good, and I should have it too, just in case. No one wants to be left behind without any resources. Changing the slides. But it could have other effects, right? I think that, online behavior, and this is largely what we'll talk about for the rest of the presentation, other people, this is how we're living life now, and so when people, what people see online is part of people's lives, right? Your online behavior, for example, or bad online behavior. I was just talking to somebody who said, they went out to a store and they saw a bunch of people without masks on, and they felt, like, why aren't you wearing masks, kind of thing, right? So if you're online, sharing something about you out and, doing something you're not supposed to be doing, that could encourage somebody else to do the same, right? So you could encourage somebody, if you're breaking self-isolation or going somewhere you're not supposed to go or going to a very populated place, think about, the effects of that behavior. You could encourage someone to break self-isolation or not wear a mask, for example, right? I am constantly surprised by all the sharing of where people are going and what they've been doing in recent months. And this goes for a variety of countries. I'm a fairly international person in this sense. I know people in a lot of different places, and I'm constantly surprised by what people share, what they're doing and where they're going. I think what we need to remember that our social media behavior has an impact on other people's behavior. Changing the slide. And it can also lead to something called social distance shaming, which is definitely a 2020 term. Maybe they'll compete for, the Oxford Dictionary's, term, the word of 2020 or something, maybe. So changing the slide. Is social distance shaming virtue signaling gone wrong? We're going to define all these in a minute. And if you could take a look at the picture in the slide, right? My reusable bag makes me better than you. This whole idea that you're, putting an image on something and sharing that, I'm doing a good thing. Pay attention to me. Is it a weird strain of FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? Or to change the slide one more time, is it even cyberbullying, which I'm sure many of you have heard of? In Russian, it's almost identical to what it is in English. So to change the slide, let's define these three terms first. So virtue signaling is a generally negative term to describe taking a visible but potentially ineffective action, ostensibly to support a good cause, but perhaps more to show off that you're more moral than others, right? Usually it's to draw attention to you that you're good, rather than to bring attention to a certain kind of like a issue or something like that. It's more about more selfishly put the attention on me. Look at the good things I'm doing, rather than I think you should support this really good thing. There's a difference there. To change the slide. FOMO is literally the fear of missing out. It describes the anxiety that an exciting or interesting event might currently be happening elsewhere, often aroused by posts seen on social media, right? The reason a lot of studies of social media, they've shown why people keep going back to social media so often and checking it like incessantly on their phones when they're out is, they just don't, especially young people don't want to feel like they've been left out of something, right? They want to be in the loop about everything that's going on. They want to know that, when there's a really great event going on, they want to see what their friends are doing. They don't want to be left out of things. And so this fear of missing out can lead to social media overconsumption. But fear of missing out, try to think about it in the context of, how we're sharing things on social media these days. Changing the slide, cyberbullying, of course, is the most challenging of this, right? It's when somebody bullies or harasses others on the internet and in other digital spaces, particularly on social media sites. And I think initially when, the concept of cyberbullying came out, it really had to do with teenagers, and probably that's the most severe place where it does occur. But cyberbullying has really expanded in recent years, with the people trolling other people, people, doxing, people harassing other people on the internet, and so on. Changing the slide. So what is social distance shaming? Let's look at a few examples from Twitter. Changing the slide. So I'll read these tweets out to you that I found. It might be time to start #social distance shaming. I understand some people cannot #stay home, and we all need to get groceries at some point, but it is obvious when people are out and about without a meaningful purpose, right? I think all these examples are from the United States, where State to state, they have very different, kinds of stay-at-home orders, ranging from very strict to somewhere in the middle. Every state still certainly has some restrictions. Changing the slide. Here's another one. So the first slide, right? I understand some people cannot stay at home, and we all need to get groceries. But some people don't have a great purpose. That's a pretty, kind of like tame version of social distance shaming. This one, takes it up a little bit. Ridiculous. This is one instance where we should let the social media trolls loose and encourage widespread shaming. Hashtag social distance shaming. Let's get it trending. So this is from a while ago. It's from late March. And basically the image I had to cut out it showed a large group of people assembled, and it says, an incredible image of the crowds today at Rattlesnake Ledge, taken at around 3 p.m. I also got a message from someone saying, trailheads around Snoqualmie are packed with cars, so much for social distancing, right? So this is what social distancing shaming kind of is. Like, look at those people having fun. How dare they? This is a very serious moment. You need to do this. You need to take this seriously. All right, let's continue with these examples. Changing the slide. At Mass Governor, hashtag Rentham, hashtag Rentham MA. I assume this is Rentham, Massachusetts. So they're calling the governor's attention. Now Massachusetts is one of the, and I used to live in Massachusetts, has one of the most strict social distancing orders around, from what I understand. From what I can tell from this might even be a rural place. I'm not sure. I don't know Rentham, Mass personally. But it says no social distancing and 0 masks at this restaurant. Do something about this, please. Hashtag plan is not working. Hashtag social distance shaming. As you can see, I don't even know how many people are there. I count 10, 11 people total, outdoors, not terribly crowded. They might be families, which generally families are allowed to, sit together, people who live together generally, even in the most strict places in the United States in terms of social distancing. It's hard to really tell distance here in this photo. It's hard to tell when this was actually taken. We can assume that it's taken today. But there's also, as you can already see just by looking at this photo, there's all sorts of possibilities. We might not know, exactly what's going on here, right? I'm going to take this person absolutely at their word, that they're concerned that there wasn't enough social distancing going on here, but you never know. Somebody could have, not like this restaurant and could be doing something here. I mean, they're writing the governor, hoping to get them involved. I don't know. You can kind of judge for yourself, I guess. Continuing on, here's somebody who's kind of like reacting to the social distance shaming, and an article that I read called "The Social Distance Shamers Are Watching" in the New York Times. And this guy says, just like eating vegan, driving an electric car, composting, which is when you take your food and you kind of like recycle it and give it off to the trash people, who then the garbage collectors, who then give it to farmers and allow it to become fertile again, or working out. So starting again, just like eating vegan, driving an electric car, composting, or working out, society has found a new way to make themselves feel like they're better than everyone else around them. Hashtag social distance shaming, hashtag COVID-19, hashtag COVID-19, hashtag social distancing. Changing the slide. And here is a kind of a funnier-ish one that asks, are we hashtag social distance shaming people yet? And if so, may I nominate the couple that took their masks off to make out in the line to enter the grocery store? All right, changing the slide. Even the mayor of New York City recently, Bill de Blasio, was recently heckled as he went for a walk. People, this is his family. There is no other people around. He does not live right next to Prospect Park, which is a park that I used to live very close to and I used to enjoy a lot once upon a time. It's in Brooklyn. The mayor lives in a different neighborhood. He came down here to take a walk, with masks on, with his family. Nothing untoward here in this photo, but he was heckled. He was social distance shamed quite a lot. The mayor, this is not an essential walk. How dare you? You're setting a bad example. I'll allow you to make what of this what you will. Changing the slide. In a New York Times article, the one I just showed you, that the Twitter user was referring to, the writer Amanda Hess says that the internet has long been identified as a breeding ground for public shame, but the coronavirus has advanced the game. If some benefit of the doubt between strangers still existed in online discourse, this mysterious, highly communicable, and deadly illness has annihilated it. Right? So the benefit of the doubt, right? Giving benefit of the doubt to those people at that restaurant in Massachusetts. I mean, that in particular was not an egregious example. That was not a very crowded place. That was not spring break in Florida, which the early social distance shaming typically looked at, parks where people have their shirts off getting suntans, or beaches during spring break that, didn't close, and so on. But this, the one in Massachusetts showed about 11 people in a very, outside and a fairly, somewhat spread out. It's unclear how big the distances are. It's unclear if those people know one another, and so on and so forth. So the benefit of the doubt, this person, Amanda Hess, is suggesting is kind of being done away with. She goes on, changing the slide. Now we are grieving, afraid, and confused. We are desperate for an outlet, and indoor finger pointing is one of the few hobbies still accessible to those sheltering in place. The photograph of the crowded public space has become the defining image of COVID shaming. We used to post photos of ourselves picnicking in the park or sunbathing with our friends, and these shaming images look eerily similar to those old tokens of springtime. Except now we're taking photos of other people and saying that those people are bad. In the absence of photos documenting the coronavirus death toll, sites of gaiety stand in for the morbid, right? Suggesting that these are taking the place of kind of the medical photos, which would allow us to take it more seriously. At least that's what I think she's getting at here. Changing the slide. Some people are making light of this phenomenon, right? This tweet was shared, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of times. Changing the slide, right? Disgusting. This photo was taken in Brooklyn. Stop being selfish and stay home. Clearly, it's a photo meant to portray, turn of the 20th century Brooklyn, Prospect Park, which is where the mayor of the city was just walking around recently. In that earlier slide. Changing the slide. Tech writer Abelia Tate, writing in The Guardian, says, when it comes to the crime of not taking a global pandemic seriously, perhaps online shaming is the perfect punishment. After all, if you go to a packed public place or hoard paracetamol, which is basically like aspirin, right? Tylenol, you're endangering other people's lives. Yet is pointing the finger actually a productive way to change others' behavior? Are we simply spreading discord at an already distressing time, right? Basically, she's questioning, is this productive behavior, right? Is this productive? Are you really going to change people's behavior or not? She gives a lot of examples. In one instance, someone uploaded a video on Instagram of them washing their hands, and they were shamed for the technique. Not just, hey, you're not doing it right. Like people are like, how dare you, promote, your hand washing techniques. They're incorrect, et cetera, et cetera. But that was relatively tame as compared to some of the other examples that she highlights, right? She outlines instances of people receiving hate mail and threats over this phenomenon, the phenomenon being social media sharing. Some people even being labeled COVIDiots. Changing the slide. In a number of instances, certainly not all, old photos have been shared, and the distances in the photo are misleading and do not always match what they are in reality. Looking back at that photo of Massachusetts, I'm not sure, how we can't really tell what the distance is between those people, can we? It's not perfect way to do it, and I don't know if that's worthy of the governor's attention. It doesn't seem like the most egregious example, but the thing is, right? Experts don't believe in the power of public shame. And to quote Dr. Lydia Woodyard, a social sciences professor at Flinders University who studies online shaming, quote, by increasing hostility in an otherwise volatile environment, we are just promoting the norm of hostility and aggression as a means of coping. So it's an interesting comment. Changing the slide. This is somebody on Twitter that I saw, an example of like their instincts were to social distance shame somebody, but they changed their mind once they had a little bit more context to it, right? So this person, I saw this just today, United States, not sure what state, long line for a COVID test. Man behind me struggles to keep the mask on his 3-year-old's face. I glare at him. How stupid is he to bring a kid along with him? My turn comes. He says, please let us go first. My kid has hemophilia, needs a test before her transfusion. I just sigh. So I think this person's admitting, their instincts were to shame somebody for a choice that they know nothing about. I definitely, I've definitely do not encourage, people to go to crowded places or anything like that. Stay at home. Listen to the health authorities wherever you live. Listen to the, local kind of restrictions that you have. I do it to a T. But don't, jump to conclusions about other people, is the, I guess, moral of that lesson. So recent studies suggest that rather than shaming, offering positive examples can help change behavior. So rather than shaming somebody next time, perhaps consider sharing a photo of you engaging in responsible behavior, such as wearing a mask and gloves, which will normalize such actions, make them seem like that's what you're supposed to do, right? Changing a slide. However, it does bring me back to the social media shares in which people who I know and I don't know very well in a variety of places around the world, clearly are not following the guidelines, or alternately, are sharing privileges that others do not have, right? By having access to an enormous house, right? Celebrities in particular have been, criticized for saying, oh, I totally sympathize with you and your small apartments, which they say from their huge mansions with, huge gardens and lawns and all this outdoor space that they have, and most city dwellers, are lucky to have access to a tiny balcony, right? So ask yourself, what impact will the sharing that you're doing online have on others, right? Will it encourage them to stay diligent and safe? Or could it breed jealousy or cause them to act unsafely? Additionally, another good point is, could someone in the future see a post and take it out of context, right? In the same way, that somebody who has a few too many at their college graduation and has some pictures of that on their social media feed, and years and years later, it's seen by someone who's about to interview them for a job and it negatively impacts them. Ask yourself, well, me sharing, this, me doing something that, maybe we're not supposed to do, impact me sometime in the future? Ask yourself that kind of question, right? Things can be seen completely out of context. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm ready to take any questions that you may have. So Richard asks, how long do you think quarantine will last in the USA? I'm probably not the person to ask this question. I have no idea. And, each state seems to have their own strategies. So, some states like New York and Massachusetts are quite strict about it, but they also had much greater outbreaks. And some other states are moving towards, bringing, opening things up a little bit more quickly. Certainly there's a bunch of states in between those two poles. And I think if there's any certainty, there's, right now it's that there's no certainty, right, in a lot of ways, right? We don't know if there's going to be a second wave. We don't know if it's just going to die out. We don't know too much to be able to say with any degree of certainty how long, quarantine, self-isolation, these things are going to last, unfortunately. A lot of people are saying that, until we have, we're not going to get back to a complete normal until we have a vaccine ready to go and people are able to have that level of immunity. And, that could happen this year. Probably more likely will happen in 2021 from what I've read. Could even take longer. There's a lot of uncertainties, too much uncertainty to be able to make a prediction about how long a self-isolation or quarantine or lockdown will last. So, question from Grapefruit Orange. Hello, have you seen any instances of social distancing shaming in Russian social media? Actually, strangely, I have not seen nearly as much of this in Russia as I've seen in the United States. In the United States, it's pretty big, and certainly there were a lot of examples in the UK as well. I have nothing stands out to me of being an example. So, perhaps the Russian social media sphere is a little bit kinder in this regard. Or perhaps I just don't know where to look. But I have not seen any instances that stand out to me in this regard. So, I think that's the best we can do, Richard. He just thanks me for the answer. He has basically the same opinion. It's too hard to really predict things. I try to, not that I have a mantra, but try to focus on the things you can control right now. That's certainly not one of them. So, question from DE3. Do you have any ideas of what type of trends will become dominant on the media landscape because of COVID-19? I know that actually a lot of media organizations are really, really, really struggling right now. Even in the best of times, right, a variety of publications, say, hey, especially the ones that give free content, without having to get a subscription, they're usually asking for money. But I think that's been even heightened that much more because of how many fewer businesses are advertising and really have cut back on their digital advertising budgets, because they're not selling products. So they don't see the point. Perhaps this is one way to save a little bit of money, and so on. And that's having a real big impact on the media landscape. So unfortunately, just like there are quite a few shopping, kind of like retail's really being hit pretty hard in the United States, and a lot of retail outlets are going under at the moment. I think unfortunately it's probably going to happen to some media outlets as well. And this includes certain social media outlets, right? I read something that Couchsurfing, which is this group that's sort of like social media for people who travel and want to meet up in different places around the world. They went to a subscription model in recent weeks because they can't afford to keep keep their website up and keep all their services up. So that could be one impact. A lot of things that used to be free could go to subscription. A lot of media outlets, unfortunately, might not make it through. So that's what I've seen so far. Perhaps I don't have any evidence of this, but one thing I could guess at least in the near term, the next year and a half, 2 years, I bet there's going to be a lot more health information. I bet those sections on websites are going to become more widely read. There could be if you're a freelance writer, there could be more gigs for you to write health related stuff. So, which goes from everything from about infectious diseases to, techniques you can do to keep you and your family safe. So, if you want to think in those terms, that might be something to get a better handle on if you're involved in journalism. I don't know about Facebook Horizon, but thank you very much, DE3, for bringing it to my attention. I'm going to do a quick search to see if I can comment on it a little bit. Maybe I have heard about it and I just didn't realize. It's Facebook Horizon. Okay, so it's virtual reality. No, I don't know about it. So it's basically about trying to take Facebook into the direction of virtual reality. I don't know if I don't know that I would necessarily be concerned with it. I don't know enough about it yet, but I'm definitely now that you've brought this to my attention, DE3, I'm definitely going to investigate it a little bit. I have not personally engaged in much virtual reality kind of stuff, and I doubt that I'm going to in the future. Once upon a time, several years ago, I did do quite a bit of editing and writing on stuff related to virtual reality, so I'm aware of it. But I always kind of had this hands off kind of approach to it. It's something that other people do, but for sure, artificial reality is becoming a huge part of our day-to-day lives, and it shouldn't be any surprise that virtual reality as well, and virtual reality in terms of social media as well, is not terribly surprising. I don't know if I have concern as much as interest as to negative effects, I assume is what you're getting at. Certainly, I don't know exactly yet, but definitely something I'll take a look at. I got a question from Richard: which news magazines would I personally recommend? I tend not to give recommendations on, because there's what I would recommend is getting to know a few publications really well, getting to know what their points of view are, who runs them, who works there, what kind of stuff, what kind of reporting they do, getting to know them really well. There's plenty of people who do not like the New York Times for a variety of reasons. But there's a publication, for example, that I've read for 25 years. I know they are run, it is, staffed by humans who make mistakes from time to time. But they also have tons of really good and invaluable reporting. So, I'm able to consume a lot of the very good reporting most of the time. But when I see something that, question, is there bias getting in there? Is this a sloppy mistake? I can kind of identify that, so, and move on and not get too distracted by that and start going, oh, this is fake news, I can't deal with this anymore. So I recommend getting to know a few publications really, really, really well, so that, you can, when you do see, you can trust them most of the time, but, you're not going to be too thrown off when you do see something that they're reporting that might not be perfect. I know that didn't really answer your question. But I think that if you get to know publications really well, you'll quickly eliminate the ones that do not have high standards for journalism ethics and high standards for reporting. Esports. So I get a question from Grapefruit Orange again. What about esports? Do you think it's a new direction for the evolution of regular sports? I think taking esports as well as the VR stuff that Facebook is doing, with Horizon. Yeah, definitely these things are going to grow. Definitely these things are going to be experimented with, and it remains to be seen how widely they'll be adapted, by people. But probably younger generations typically drive this kind of stuff. But I think we've seen, in particular for esports and VR, we've already seen a lot of trends pointing towards this, kind of development, and they, people might, be going out less in the next couple of years. For sure, right? And so, like, if people are not feeling so comfortable going out to public places as much, even if it goes down just a little bit, right? They're gonna look for ways to, fill their time for sure. And I can speak personally from, and I think I demonstrated in the presentation. We're really getting tired of Zoom meetings and presentations online and lectures online. So stuff like esports and VR is way more entertaining than sitting on a Zoom roundtable. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for this stuff, and it could be an evolution of regular sports. People are, it's even at just a small percentage of people are less likely to go in for regular sports. That could lead to some increased experimentation with that kind of stuff for sure. So from BBTH, do you think the virus will influence migration? I don't really feel confident to discuss that question. I think the virus is going to, COVID's going to have a major impact on all areas of life, and I'll leave it at that. And a comment from Alia K. Thank you so much. As always, it is not only interesting, but also useful information. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So, yeah, I hope one day to get to see some of you again in person, for a seminar. Who knows when that will be? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. Do not be a stranger. Please let us know what you thought about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. And to join our other AMC online programs, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check updates on our website, amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, and produce together. Be well, and till next time.